Hi guys, today we're going to be making this skirt, as you can see on the screen, and this skirt that I made fits a size small, but I do tell you throughout the video how to size it to your own body so you can make it in any size that you would like. And to make the skirt, I used Lion Brand Heartland yarn. It's a size 4 100% acrylic yarn, and it's in the color Grand Canyon. You do not need to use this yarn. You can use any size 4 yarn that you would like. I also use a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook, but because I give you sizing tips throughout the video, feel free to use a different size hook. In fact, I believe that if you use a size 5 millimeter crochet hook, you'll end up with kind of the similar look and possibly even a more similar size to the one I make because I crochet very tight. But you could start with a 5 millimeter, a 5.5 millimeter, whatever you'd like. I also use a pair of scissors and a yarn needle to sew in my ends. And this ribbon I have here is completely optional. You can see in the video that I added a little bit around the bottom in one of the pictures, but you don't have to do that. It was completely decorative, and I do let you know that in the video. So if you don't have any ribbon or you don't want to use ribbon in it, you do not have to. I used this Celebrate at Tempo ribbon. It's just a 100% polyester ribbon, and it's a 1/4 inch. So if you would like to do that, then I recommend getting some ribbon, and then also a tape measure. But again, this isn't needed. If you can just size it to your body, and again, all of that information can be found throughout the video. But if you want to take official measurements, I do explain that as well, and you can use this to size in case you're making it for someone else, or this is just easier for you to do, but also completely optional. Other than that, we'll get right into making this skirt with the ruffles. So to get started, we're going to start with a slip knot on our hook. And I'm going to chain 10. So 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, and 10. And this is actually going to be the width of the band. So if you would like that band to be a little bit wider, feel free to chain more than 10 here. And from here, we're going to single crochet into the second chain from the hook. So remember that loop on your hook doesn't count as anything. We count back 2, 1, and 2, and into that second chain from the hook, we're going to put a single crochet. And I'm just going to single crochet into every chain all the way across. All right, I'm just coming to my final single crochet here of row 1. And from here, I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and for row 2, we're going to do single crochets across again, but instead of going into that stitch like we normally would, where both those loops are on top of your hook, I'm going to do them into the back loop only. So you can see the V, that's the front loop, and the back loop. And I'm going to do my single crochets into that back loop only. So go right into it like that. So that back loop is on your hook, and complete your single crochet. And I'm just going to work my way across doing these back loop only single crochets. All right, I'm just coming to my final stitch here, and don't get confused with this loop that's on the side. That was actually the chain that we skipped right at the beginning. So if you look at the top, you can see that V, that's your final stitch of the row. So I'm going to do my back loop only single crochet into that stitch. And from this point, we're just going to keep repeating what we just did for row 2. So for row 3, we're going to chain 1, turn our work. That chain 1 never counts as a stitch. And we're going to do our single crochet into the back loop only in that first stitch. And just working that all the way across. And when we get to that final stitch, we'll do our back loop only single crochet into that final stitch, chain 1, turn our work, work across, chain 1, turn our work, and so on. And you want to continue with that pattern until your band, when lightly stretched, will fit around your wearing waist as seen in the photo, or when you hold it around yourself, it will fit where that band is going to sit when you're wearing the skirt. You can lightly get it to stretch and the ends will meet. And when kind of fully stretched, it will fit around your hip measurement as seen in the photo. So you can hold it around yourself, or as seen in the following clip, I can get it to reach that hip measurement. That will ensure that when you put the skirt on, it will fit over your bottom area and still fit nice around where the band will be sitting. And you do want to end on an even row. So I'm going to do 138 rows total, and in the following clip, I'll show you a little bit more information with the sizing. All right, I just finished my 138th row. I just took my hook out here so I can show you measurements. So my waist measurement is 34 inches. And the measurement around my bottom area is 38.5 inches. So you can see here, sorry I can't get it all on camera, but if I lay out the band and measure it without stretching it at all, it measures right around 27 inches, but I'm able to lightly stretch that band. I'll just hold it over at this side, and when I lightly stretch out the band, so lightly stretched, I can get it to 34 inches, and when I stretch it even more, so you want to make sure that the stretch band will fit the measurement of the around your bottom area, so the wider measurement. If I stretch it out even more, so I'm really stretching it while I measure, I can get it to that 38.5 inches. So at this point, after your final stitch of your final row, and again you want to make sure that you ended on an even numbered row, we're going to chain 1. And we're going to connect the ends of the band together with slip stitches. So I'm just making sure not to twist that band. Fold the ends to each other, and I'm just going to turn my work a little bit here. There we go. And we're going to slip stitch these ends together. So to slip stitch, we want to go into the first stitch on this side of the band that's closest to you, right into that first stitch, and then you want to go into the first stitch on the band that's furthest away from you over on the right hand side, like so. And then you want to pull that yarn through both of those stitches and through the loop on your hook. And that was a slip stitch. And then we're going to jump to the next stitch over on this side of the band that's closest to you. And the next stitch over here on the band side of the band that's furthest away. Pull the yarn through both of those stitches and through the loop on your hook. And I'll show you one more time. So the next stitch on this side, the next stitch over on this side of the band, pull the yarn through both of those stitches and through the loop on your hook. And I'm just going to work my way across here, slip stitching these two ends of the band to each other, and it should work out that you have the same number of stitches on both of these ends. And if you don't, unfortunately somewhere along the line something got a little bit messed up, because it should work out that you have the same number of stitches on both of these sides. So I'm just going to slip stitch my way across, and I'll see you in just a moment. Working on the final slip stitch, like so, and those ends are connected. And then I want to chain one. And at this point we want to turn this band right side out so that the seam here ends up on the inside of the band and not on the outside. So I'm just going to fold it right side out, like so. So the band is on the inside, and then I'm going to turn my work. So I'm working around the band like this, and that seam is on the inside, so it just looks a little bit cleaner out here. And for round one here, we want to evenly space single crochets all the way around the band. And we don't have specific stitches to go into here because it's the edge of that band, but we want to plan to have one single crochet per row that you did. So again, I did 138 rows, so I want to make sure I have 138 single crochets evenly spaced all the way around. It's very important to end up with the same number of stitches. And you just kind of want to put your hook wherever it will fit. I'm going to work over this tail so I don't have to sew it in later. So I'll go into that first one with my first single crochet, and I'll kind of show you where I place them. So when I get to the rows that kind of stick out a little bit, and you don't need to do this exactly like me, you can kind of just wherever your hook will fit, and if you kind of pull apart the work, you might see the spaces open up a little bit better, and you can just work your way around wherever your hook will fit. That's completely fine. But how I do it, and I find that it just makes the edges look a little bit cleaner, is on these rows where they stick out, I kind of grab, you can see you have that top loop and then a loop that's just a little bit lower. I kind of grab that loop to push it out of the way, and then I go in right there with my stitch. And then on the rows that are kind of pushed in a little bit, you can see if you look through this opening here, there's the strand of yarn that's going right through it. I go to the right of that strand of yarn, and honestly the way that I do it can be a little bit trickier because you kind of got to push stuff out of the way, but I do find that it looks nice and clean afterwards. So again, we're at the row that sticks out. I'm going to grab that second loop that's from the top, kind of push it out of the way and go behind there with my single crochet. And then on the row that's sticking in, you can see that strand of yarn right there. I'm going to go to the right of that strand of yarn. And if you continue that around, that will work out to 1 single crochet per row. But again, do whatever you're comfortable with. If you're having too much trouble with that, feel free to just, you can see an opening there, there's one, an opening there, there's your second, and work your way around like that, and it will still look very nice. So whatever works best for you. I'm going to work my single crochets all the way around, making sure I have the same number around as number of rows that I have, and then I will come back on. All right, I just finished my final single crochet of the round, and I counted and made sure I had 138. So from here, I'm going to slip stitch to that first single crochet of the round. Make sure you're not going into that chain 1 we did after the slip stitches, but you're going into the very first single crochet of the round. There we go. So pull the yarn through that stitch and through the loop on your hook. And I'm going to chain 1, and that chain 1 does not count as a stitch. And I'm going to go back into that same stitch that I just slip stitched to with a double crochet. And round 2 is just 1 double crochet into every stitch all the way around. So I'm just going to keep working a double crochet into each and every stitch. And when I get back around, I will come back on. And again, you should end up with the same number of double crochets as the previous round. All right, I just finished my final double crochet, and don't get this final, it looks like a stitch that you should be putting a double crochet into, but that's actually the slip stitch from the previous round. So that's how you know that you've reached the end of the round, when you reach that slip stitch, and then you'll see your chain 1 there. So we're not going to put a stitch into that. So if need be, just count your stitches around and make sure you have the right number. And then we're going to slip stitch to the first double crochet, so not that chain 1, the first actual double crochet of the round. And for round 3, we are, and this is actually the first round of the 2-round repeat for the majority of the pattern, we're going to chain 1. Again, that chain 1 does not count as a stitch, and we're going to do what is called a 3 double crochet cluster stitch into that first stitch that we just slip stitched to. So to do a 3 double crochet cluster stitch, we yarn over, go into that first stitch that we just slip stitched to, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops on your hook. And we're going to do what we just did 3 times total. So that was the first time. We're going to do it again. Yarn over, go back into that same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops on your hook. That was the second time, and we'll do it one more time. Yarn over, go back into that same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through those first 2 loops on your hook. And at this point, you should have 4 loops on your hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through all 4 of those loops that were on your hook. And at this point, I like to kind of hold the top of the stitch with my with my 2 fingers here, and then I give the working yarn a little tug just to tighten that stitch a little bit. That's not crucial, you don't have to do this part, but I do like to do that. And then we are going to chain 1, and then we're going to skip the next stitch, and into the next stitch, we're going to do our 3 double crochet cluster stitch. So again, we yarn over, skip that next stitch, into the next stitch, we insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through those first 2 loops on your hook. Again, we do that 3 times total. Yarn over, go back into that same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through those first 2 loops on your hook. And one more time, yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through those first 2 loops on your hook. And at this point, you have the 4 loops on top of your hook. We yarn over and pull through all 4 of those loops. And again, I just give the working yarn a little tug to tighten it and chain 1. And I'll show you again. We yarn over, skip that next stitch, and into the next stitch, we do our 3 double crochet cluster stitch. So we insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through those first 2 loops. Yarn over, insert your hook into that same spot, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through those first 2 loops on your hook, and one more time, yarn over, insert your hook into that same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through those first 2 loops on your hook. And you do this until those 4 loops are on your hook, and then you yarn over and pull through all 4 of those loops. And then again, I put my 2 fingers here, just give this a little tug until you feel a little bit of resistance, and then we chain 1. And that's going to be the pattern for this round. After the chain 1, we skip the next stitch, 3 double crochet, cluster stitch into the stitch after that skip stitch. Chain 1, skip a stitch, cluster stitch into the next stitch. And I'm just going to repeat this all the way around, chaining 1 after our 3 double crochet cluster stitch, skipping a stitch, cluster into the next, chain 1, skip a stitch, cluster into the next. So I'm going to repeat that all the way around for round 3, and when I'm back over on this side, I will come back on. I'm just coming to the end of the round. I just chained 1, so I'm going to skip that next stitch, and into the next stitch I'm going to do my final 3 double crochet cluster stitch. And then I'm going to chain 1, and I have 1 final stitch prior to that slip stitch and chain 1 that I'm going to skip. So it should always work out that you have 1 final stitch to skip after you chain 1. And then we're going to slip stitch into the top of that first cluster stitch of the round to join. And sometimes it can be a little bit tough to see where to put your hook on that first one, but if you just look at the top of it, you'll see that V, and if you just go right below that V, like so, that's where you put your slip stitch. And then I'm going to chain 1, which does not count as a stitch. And then we're going to go on to the second round of the 2 round repeat that will make up the majority of your piece. So on this round, it's just going to be a double crochets all the way around, and I'll show you where to put them. So our first double crochet will go right into that stitch that we just slip stitched to. And then our next one goes into the chain space in between those cluster stitches. So I'm not actually working in the chain, but I'm going to go right into that chain space and put my double crochet. And then again into the top of that cluster stitch, and you can see a little bit better here where your hook is supposed to go. Sometimes if it's not clear, you can kind of pull it apart a little bit and you'll see that space open up in the top of those cluster stitches. So I'll put a double crochet there, and then again in the chain space between the cluster stitch, and one into the top of the next cluster stitch, and one into the chain space between the cluster stitches. So that's what I'm going to work all the way around. It's one double crochet in the top of each of the 3 double crochet cluster stitches, and one double crochet in each of the chain spaces between the cluster stitches. Just coming to the end of the round, so I'm going to do my final double crochet in that final chain space prior to the slip stitch and chain 1. So you should always be ending with a double crochet in that final chain space of the round, and then again we're going to slip stitch to the first double crochet of the round and chain 1, which does not count as a stitch. And at this point, we're just going to keep alternating the previous 2 rounds. So that was round 3, which is the cluster stitch round, and round 4, which is that double crochet round. So I just did my double crochet round. So now I'm going to do my cluster stitch round. So again, I'll go into that first stitch with my first 3 double crochet cluster stitch, chain 1, skip a stitch, 3 double crochet cluster stitch, chain 1, skip a stitch, and so on. And when I complete that round, I will slip stitch to that first cluster stitch of the round, chain 1, which never counts as a stitch, and then I will do my double crochet round, which is double crocheting in each of the cluster stitches and chain spaces all the way around, and then slip stitching to the first double crochet of the round, and so on. So I'm just going to keep alternating those 2 rounds until my skirt reaches 13 inches. And when I measure that, I'm going to include the band in that measurement. So starting from here to the bottom of the skirt, it will be 13 inches. You can make it whatever size you would like. I got to 13 inches because it's about 4 inches from my knee. And I'm keeping in mind that there's going to be the additional rounds of ruffles. So I thought that 13 inches would work good for me, but you can make it as long as you would like. And if you'd like it to look similar, just do it about 4 inches from your knee, keeping in mind again that there's going to be those additional rounds. One thing that I will say is make sure you end on a double crochet round. So I'm going to do 26 rounds total. So this cluster stitch round, I'm starting round round 5, and I'm going to keep working it up until I get to round 26, which will make sure that I end on the double crochet round. So I'm just going to keep working up my skirt, and you do the same with yours, and I'll see you in just a moment. I just completed the final round of the main portion here. And all I did was slip stitch, because remember we're going to end on a double crochet round. So all I did was slip stitch into the first double crochet of the final round, and then I chained 1. And if I measure it at this point, you can see, remember I'm going to start at the top of that band, and it's just about 13 inches. It's actually closer to 12.5, but it's pretty close to 13 inches, and I think that will work fine for me. So after you complete your final round, we're going to go on to the ruffle portion of the skirt. So all I do, again, I slip stitch to that first double crochet of the round, I chained one, and I'm going to go back into that same stitch that I just slip stitched to and do 2 double crochets. 1 and 2. And all I'm going to do for this round, which is round 27 for me, is just 2 double crochets into every stitch all the way around. So there was 2 in the next one, 1 and 2 into the next stitch, and 2 into the next. So I'm just going to work my way around, putting 2 double crochets into every stitch, and I will see you when I've come back around. Okay, I'm just completing my final increase stitch here, so putting 2 double crochets in that final stitch before the slip stitch and chain 1, and then I'm going to slip stitch to the first double crochet of the round and chain 1. Again, that chain 1 does not count as a stitch, and you can see that ruffle. So for the next round, or round 28 for me, I'm just going to do 1 double crochet in each stitch around, and I'm going to do the same for round 29. So I'm going to do 2 rounds at this point of just 1 double crochet in each stitch all the way around. When I get back around, I will slip stitch to that first double crochet, chain 1, and do a second round. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera, and once I have my 2 rounds of double crochets, I will come back on. I just finished my 2 rounds of 1 double crochet in every stitch, so you can see it has a nice ruffle. And feel free to do as many rounds as you would like of the 1 double crochet in every stitch to get the ruffles as long as you're comfortable with. I'm just going to have the 3 rounds total of the double crochets. So at this point, I just completed my final double crochet. I'm going to slip stitch to that first double crochet and chain 1. The chain 1 does not count as a stitch. So for the final round of this skirt, so this is going to be round 30 for me, we're just going to do 1 single crochet into every stitch all the way around, and this will just make the edge of this skirt look really nice and clean. So I'm just going to go ahead and do my 1 single crochet into every stitch all the way around. All right, I have 1 final single crochet to do here, and then I'm going to slip stitch to the first single crochet of the round, and I'm going to fasten off at this point. So I'm going to chain 1, cut my yarn, and pull that yarn through, and then pull tight, and we're all fastened off. And at this point, so I'm looking at the bottom of the skirt. I just want to, we're going to clean, I've just folded the skirt over. We're going to clean up these edges, but I've already done that on this one. So I'm going to show you on a separate little piece that I have here, but I just want to show you, all you're going to do is turn your skirt. So you're looking at the top band, and then I'm going to turn it over. So I am looking at where the seam is. And that's where we're going to just clean up the top edges around here with single crochets. So again, I've already done it, so I'm just going to bring in this piece here and show you on this. So if I'm looking at the top of the piece, this is where, I'll get this skirt out of the way. This is where the skirt would come down this way, and we're looking at the top where the seam is, and all you're going to do is bring in your yarn. And I actually start with a slip knot on my hook when I'm introducing the yarn, but you can do this whichever way you feel comfortable with. And then I'm just going to go right next to the seam there, put my hook through the top and slip stitch. So I'm going to pull the yarn both through that stitch and through the loop on my hook, like so. And then I'm going to chain one. I'm going to go back into that stitch with a single crochet. And again, I'm just going to work over that tail so I don't have to sew it in later. And then this is the same as we did when we cleaned up the edges on this side. So you're just going to work your way around, and wherever your hook will fit, you're going to put your single crochet. So just exactly as you did it before. I did show you how I did the other side, but on this side I'll just show you a couple stitches here. It's just one single crochet, evenly spaced all the way around, and again, plan to have the same number around as you had on this side. So it's just one per row on that original band. And then when you've made your way around, you just slip stitch to the first stitch of the round, and then you fasten off completely. And that's how you do that. But other than that, we're getting very close here to being done. So I've brought in my skirt here that I've just about completed, and all I'm going to do at this point is just sew in all of the ends. So I'm going to go around, there's lots on the inside there you can see, and I'm just going to sew in all of these ends off camera, and then I will come back on. I got all of my ends sewn in. I'm going to turn my piece right side out again. So at this point, it's kind of up to you if you would like to add any ties or anything like that. You could either bring in your yarn and use a smaller hook and chain up a length that would go around your waist, keeping in mind you'd want enough to make a nice bow in the front, and you could either weave it through, you know, kind of in between these ridges that stick out all the way around, and then tie a bow in the front. You could even weave it around this first double crochet row, skipping a couple at a time or skipping everyone. It's completely up to you. You could also use ribbon, which I do use in a lot of my projects. So I have this ribbon here, and then you could even attach it to a pin or something, and then kind of weave it in and out the center, and then tie a bow in the front so it's kind of in the center, or again weave it through that first row. It's completely up to you. All I'm going to do, because mine fits okay, I've cut a length of yarn, and I'm actually going to, if I look at the bottom of the skirt, and you do not need to do this, this is just kind of a decorative thing, I'm going to go ahead and weave this ribbon through this final double crochet row prior to where we did the increase row for the ruffles. So I'm going to weave it in and out 2 at a time, and then do a bow in the front. So all I do is kind of find, you can see both sides here, I'm just going to pick a spot that is the center. I've already cut my length. I cut more than enough because I can always cut it after it's been woven through. Again, I will just kind of find a center point, and just start weaving. So going down, pulling that through, making sure I'm leaving the length to do the bow, and then coming up after 2. And then skipping 2, going down, skipping those 2, and coming up through the next one. So I'm just going to work my way around the entire skirt doing this, just weaving this ribbon. But again, if this is kind of a little bit confusing, you do not need to do this. And then at the end, once the ribbon is back over on this side, I will tie a nice bow in the front.